Local programming on KRWG Public Media made possible in part by viewers like you. Thank you.
This is KRWG Public Media, TV, radio, online. News that matters. Now, across the Mesilla Valley and the borderland, the stories that shape our community. From the KRWG Broadcast Center at New Mexico State University, this is Newsmakers.
Thank you for joining us for our Veterans Day edition of Newsmakers. I'm KC Counts. You'll hear today from writer, soldier, and pilot Bob Worthington, whose award-winning books tell of his time in Vietnam. But first, housing instability is an issue that affects tens of thousands of veterans nationwide. The U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs has given Las Cruces the designation of functionally ending veteran homelessness. But officials say there is still much work to be done to ensure that at-risk veterans get the help that they need. KRWG Public Media's Jonny Coker reports.
Paige Slater is a Gulf War veteran who served in the Army's Airborne Division for 10 years. He said that joining the Army was one of the best decisions that he ever made, but he admits that the war took a toll on his physical and mental health. He says that this led to instability and eventually homelessness.
When you come home and you get out of the service, they don't teach you how to become a civilian anymore. There's no way to describe it. You can watch your movies, you can do anything you want, play your video games, but you see stuff that human beings shouldn't see. And the problem is it stays with you. You see it every day. I know America's the land of the home and the free, but people like us fought to protect it, and then the government, they only do what makes them look good. So I think our government turns their back on us.
In the United States, there were over 37,000 veterans experiencing homelessness in January of 2020, according to the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. In recent years, the city of Las Cruces has been investing in resources for those facing housing instability. But according to officials, there's still much that needs to be done in order to maintain infrastructure and keep up with rising housing costs and the requirements of veterans in need. Becky Curran, Las Cruces City Councilor for District 5, says that the city government supports nonprofits in order to keep veterans off the street.
Working at Community of Hope, I know that there are really good opportunities for veterans to connect with a number of, with the VA, with Social Security Administration, and I know that those bureaucratic hurdles are a big part of why veterans experience homelessness, and overcoming those hurdles is a big part of that. And I think we continue to support organizations like Community of Hope to make sure that those folks can get connected with resources right away, help them find housing, help them find a way to receive the benefits that they're entitled to.
Nicole Martinez, Executive Director of Mesilla Valley Community of Hope, said that even though Las Cruces has been given the designation of operationally ending veteran homelessness, rising housing costs are becoming more problematic and making it more difficult to house veterans.
We have the 22-unit complex, which has really streamlined housing for our veterans, but that's only 22 veterans at a time. There's a lot more need for affordable housing in our community that could serve our veterans who are homeless.
With rising costs and instability caused by the pandemic, Martinez says that more funding is always needed.
We could use more funding for development of affordable housing to make sure that there are more options for everybody who is looking to end their homelessness. Also, supportive services funding would be incredibly helpful as we wrap services around those who are transitioning from homelessness to housed, and addressing any other issues that they might have surrounding them. Again, something like needing to obtain income, needing assistance with mental health services or substance use services. We would really like to see those programs be more available and more sustainably funded.
Paige Slater said the Community of Hope saved his life by getting him off the street and enrolling him in healthcare programs.
The American public really doesn't see what we do. They see a homeless veteran, God, look at the way he's dressed. And do people think we like being like this? The only thing I know about Cruces is Community of Hope. So if the city helps them, then they're doing their job. For me to call them guardian angels means a lot. they're not just, you know, I know it's a job they have, but they take it way more than a job. You know what I mean? And like I said, I think they're all great. I mean that sincerely.
According to the VA, homelessness among veterans has decreased by 50% since 2010. However, between the COVID-19 pandemic and the current state of the housing market, officials say that there's still much work to be done. For KRWG Public Media, I'm Jonny Coker.
Dr. Bob Worthington is a Vietnam veteran, a retired lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army, an author, and a retired NMSU professor of journalism. Bob, welcome back to Milton Hall and KRWG Public Media.
Thank you very much.
And of course, you're a lot more than that. And I think with your unique perspective, your doctorate is in psychology. I'd like to begin with some of your thoughts on veteran homelessness and PTSD as you've studied it.
PTSD, I was one of the original researchers in the area in the 1970s. And back then it was a stress disorder, not PTSD. What I had found, about 15% of military personnel served in Vietnam had some form of adjustment difficulty returning. The popular media said 50%, 75%. Some professionals even said that anyone that served in Vietnam would be disturbed upon returning. In the mid-1980s, Congress paid for a major national study, and they found out that the PTSD prevalence among veterans was 15.2%. So PTSD that we find from the Middle East is different from what I had seen back in the 70s and early 80s.
How do you characterize the issue of veteran homelessness?
I'm not so sure it's as much a veteran problem as a people problem, in that people that have lost jobs, lost their homes, don't have a place to stay. They could be a veteran, they could be a mother, a father, single person. I think it's the times that put them there as opposed to what they once were.
What did you know about stress from military service before you started doing your research in PTSD, and how did that knowledge change over time?
My first combat was in the Middle East in 1958 when I was a PFC in the Marines. We were going into a totally unknown situation. We knew very, very little about the opposition, and we had no idea what would happen. But the leaders we had, our company commander, most of the senior non-commissioned officers, were all Korea vets. So we, as the lower ranking people, felt blessed that our leadership was people who had been in combat before. So when I went to Vietnam, I was much older. I had tons of training. I was there because I asked to be there, and I was not with American units. So a lot of the rules and regulations that would apply to most military units did not apply to me. Again, I was the boss. I made the decision. So my position was quite a bit different than if I had been with an American unit. So I became a psychologist, and I constantly read newspapers, magazines, and books that if you served in Vietnam, you would not be able to adapt successfully returning to civilian life. I didn't have nightmares. Loud noises didn't bother me. In a few weeks, I went from combat to being a graduate student, and all of my friends were like me. So the question was, is this true? Am I missing something here? So that began my research into the effects Vietnam would have on veterans returning to civilian life.
Let's talk about your entry into military service.
I was a sophomore in Dartmouth College. I was more interested in parties and girls than academics, and I had broken a leg in multiple places at the beginning of school due to a motorcycle accident. So getting around campus in the winter in northern New Hampshire was not easy. Gave me an excuse to skip classes. At any rate, I knew I was flunking out. I knew I'd be expelled. So I took a 2-year leave of absence to enlist in the Marine Corps. And in the Marines, I was informed I had been expelled. The expulsion came and went. I finished my tour with the Marines, asked Dartmouth what I had to do to return, and they said, just come on back.
Now, that wasn't the only nasty break that you had. You had another one pretty shortly after that, right? A parachute accident?
The skull and the backbone are probably the only bones that have not been broken. I've probably, through my insurance, I have sent children of orthopedic surgeons to many colleges.
Let me ask you, because we're going to get back to some of those injuries a little bit later, but let me ask you when you felt the calling to write.
Actually, in freshman English, I had an English professor that, for some reason I don't understand, didn't like me. So he wanted to flunk me. But at Dartmouth then, you could not flunk a freshman out of English. You had to send them to a remedial class. So I went to the remedial class, and my teacher there was my heavyweight crew coach. So he tested me and asked why I was there. And we did a few exercises during the semester I was with him, but most of the time we discussed crew and other things. But I had returned from Vietnam. I read a gun magazine article that said all GIs needed handguns. I wrote the editor. I said that the article was a bunch of baloney. We needed automatic weapons because fighting in the jungle, firepower is king, not a little handgun. So I was asked to write an article. I did. I got paid a lot of money. And I said, hey, this is easy. So I wrote another gun article, sold it, made more money. That was 55 years ago. And since then, I have had published over 2,600 articles and books.
Now, your third book in your trilogy about your military service is just out or due out soon?
I'm thinking it's going to be out in December. It has a publication date of 2022.
Mm-hmm. And did you always know that there was going to be a series of books about your service, or did you just think, I'll write a book?
No, I've been, like I said, writing for 55 years, and I think that a lot of different things I've done in my life have had interest to other people because it's been different, it's been unusual, and I've been involved in a lot of things that have ended up making history. So I thought I would write the first book on my first tour in Vietnam, and that did very well. So I wrote the second book on my second tour in Vietnam, and then the third book is about my last decade in the Army as a psychologists.
BobWorthingtonWriter.com, where you can learn more about the books and Bob's service in general. And now I want to get back to some of the injuries that you suffered along the way, including one that you received a Purple Heart for. What happened?
We had let me back up. I was an advisor to Vietnamese civil and military forces on the Cambodian border. And back then in 1968, 69, we could not pursue across the border if we were fighting the North Vietnamese or the Viet Cong. So we had agents, we being the Vietnamese, had secret agents in Cambodia, and they would tell us when troops or munitions, weapons would cross the border where we were, so we could set up an ambush. So we had everything set up, and one night I took 3 helicopters and we created a special ops night mission to locate the rockets that had crossed the border, and we found them in bunkers in a field, and the field was not big enough for the gunships to get down and shoot. So I had an M79, a grenade launcher, plenty of grenades. So I told the pilots if they get down and hover in front of the bunkers, I'd blow them up with the grenades. And then that went well with several of them. And then about the last one, they had people in it, and that's when we engaged in a gunfight.
And you were hit by gunfire?
Yes.
Yes.
I asked the pilot, I asked him, are you flying into your shrapnel? He said, no, why? I said, well, I've just been hit then. And I pulled the bullet fragments out of the back of the thigh, and we continued to blow up the bunkers, and then I went back and my team medic patched me up. Unfortunately, got infected. I had to be sent to a hospital in Saigon to have it operated on.
I definitely want to get to this story without running out of time. I read that you actually were taken to the morgue at one point. It was not related to that injury though, right?
No, I got hookworm when I first returned to Vietnam the second time. If you've got scratches on your hand and you're in combat operations and you're approaching a village, when the shooting starts, you get down as low as you can on the ground. And that's where the villagers would have their morning constitution. Feces would be loaded with parasites, hookworms, scratches on the hand. My hands go down, the hookworm get in the body. And the Americans did not know what happened to me. I was at the 25th Division medical facility, and they couldn't figure it out. And after an operation, I just about passed out. A medevac took me to a field hospital, evacuation hospital, and they couldn't do much, so they probed and took blood, stool samples, everything, and then laid me out in the morgue because I was dying. But the lab found that I had hookworm, so I was passed out by then, but people came to the morgue, gave me what I needed to have, and 24, 36 hours, I woke up on the ward.
Well, we're glad you're home.
So am I.
Thank you for your service, Bob. I want to ask you what advice you have for young people who are interested in military service today.
I think there are several advantages. The military today is about like it was when I was there. I've got a granddaughter, a West Point graduate, who is on a master's level fellowship in the Army. She's had 3 combat deployments so far, and she graduated from West Point in 2014. So we talk about my Army versus hers. But the military is an opportunity for people to get training, education, experience. And the thing I like best about the Army is when I went from infantry to psychology, I was a major. And I did not start out again as a psychologist at the bottom of the professional food chain. I moved into the middle level ranks, and the military will allow you to do that. You get, I think, a decent retirement. I retired at age 44, 25 years in the military, and the military, unlike other major corporations, treat you like you're still one of theirs on active duty.
Did you find it easy to come back home to family life after the war?
I did, but again, I was there because I wanted to be. I was especially highly trained. I was not with Americans, I was with Vietnamese. I loved them as a people, and I was good at what I was doing, and being the boss, I made the decisions. So I was in a totally different situation, and I found going from combat to being a graduate student a piece of cake.
I know you just lost your wife of 62 years.
Yes.
About a year and a half ago. Sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
And thank her as well for her service in staying behind and keeping the family together while you were away. I know that's a big sacrifice.
I think that the wives today, they could be either gender. Back then, most of the spouses were wives. They had the harder job. I was trained to what I was doing what I wanted, and there was considerable danger involved, but I had more control over it than my wife did, who was home, and any day a olive drab sedan with a couple of officers could pull up and inform her that I was no longer around. So it was much harder for the spouses than it ever was for me.
Bob Worthington, author, soldier, pilot. I know you've got another book coming out next year about 40 years in the air. So best of luck with that project. And thank you so much for telling your stories and spending some time with us today.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.
We're going to end today's program with younger veterans and the programs and organizations at New Mexico State University that aim to assist them with the transition to higher education. KRWG public media scholar Noah Raess has more.
For many veterans, returning to civilian life can be a big challenge. Meeting new people, getting an education, and figuring out how to make ends meet can become overwhelming for those returning home. Hector Sanchez from the Military and Veterans Assistance Programs say that they face many unique challenges.
The first challenge is just the transition of getting back into civilian life. Many of our servicemen, when they're in, everything pretty much is not necessarily done for them, but there's a structure of how they're to do things and a chain of command. Well, when they leave the military, they don't have that anymore.
According to College Factual, NMSU has 620 students on the GI Bill, meaning that those students have most, if not all, of their tuition covered. The Military and Veterans Assistance Programs are also there to provide support.
Our programs, our office's main objective is to offer advocacy for our students, all the way from getting admitted to the university, as well as graduation. And we also do a financial aid aspect as well.
The Military and Veterans Assistance Programs also employ veterans like Sari Fresquez, creating a very welcoming environment for veterans.
So I served 4 years on active duty. I was a chemical specialist. So we essentially teach people how to use protective gear against any type of nuclear attack, chemical attack, biological attack.
While working towards her degree in biology, Sari works as a VA facilitator for the program, helping veterans go over the hurdles she knows well.
We come from a different culture, and sometimes I feel as though they may feel isolated. I did myself. I felt like maybe perhaps I was unable to find a friend group that I could essentially feel comfortable around, and speak about my experiences. But luckily there are organizations here that they do provide for us to ease our transition.
One of these organizations is the Student Veterans Organization, a group for veterans by veterans. After serving in the Navy for 20 years, President Nathan Molyneux wants to provide a different type of assistance.
Our mission is to help veterans or people interested in helping veterans have the resources and tools to succeed in their higher education and after graduation. Mainly provides like a space to meet other students that have similar life experiences and camaraderie and then similar concerns and kind of help each other out.
Transitioning for somebody who's been in 4 years or 22 years or whatever their circumstances is, I think that NMSU has done a really good job about helping veterans and their dependents. I'm just glad that I at least chose a school that was comfortable with other veterans.
According to Pew Research, 47% of post-9/11 veterans say that readjusting to civilian life was difficult. When combined with starting college for the first time, returning home is made all the more difficult. With programs like the Military and Veterans Assistance Programs and student-run organizations like the Student Veterans Organization, many are hoping to make the adjustment easier. For KRWG Public Media, I'm Raess.
That's our time for now. Join us this week on KRWG Radio. Every weekday, it's Morning Edition, 5 to 9, Fresh Air at 11, followed by Here and Now from noon to 2, and All Things Considered, 4 to 7 p.m. KRWG News is always online at krwg.org, and we'd like to hear from you. Email us with story ideas and video submissions. The address is feedback@nmsu.edu. For all of us at KRWG News, I'm KC Counts. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time on Newsmakers.